Today I'll show you how to combine basic shapes and materials to make 6 simple features you can add to your buildings to make them come alive. Let's go! I start with a scrap of foam and cut it with my utility knife. To get nice clean cuts, use a sharp blade, go slow and steady, and use multiple cuts at a shallow angle. Let's make a door for this box. I grab a piece of cardboard and draw an outline of my foam block. Then I use my scissors to cut out the shape, going slightly inside the lines to make an edge between the box and the door. I cut off the corners at a 45-degree angle to give it a sci-fi vibe, and finally I glue the door onto the box with the smooth side facing up so it'll eventually have a nice smooth surface. PVA glue is ideal here because super glue would melt the foam and hot glue is too thick and would leave a gap. Paint it whatever color you like. I chose yellow for this one. If you have some extra water slide transfers lying around, they're a nice and easy way to add an extra level of detail. I use a sponge to stipple on some brown to make the box look weathered. And I do the same thing with a metallic color. And finally I add a rust effect to finish up the paint job. This is pretty much how I paint everything in this video. Next up, we're gonna make a little access panel to open the door of the box we just made. I start by cutting 2 small rectangles. One will act as the main panel and the other one will be a screen. I want the latter one to fit inside the first at around 2/3 the height with a small border around it. To make buttons, I used the smallest size my hole puncher could make to punch holes in a piece of cardboard. This left me with a bunch of small discs, perfect for buttons. If you don't have a hole puncher, you can make square buttons instead. And then I glued them in place using PVA glue, so I would have plenty of time to align them before the glue set. Finally, I removed the excess glue. I primed it black and used a couple of blue colors to paint the screen, starting with the darkest one. The buttons I painted a dark red. Then I added edge highlights around the screen with the lighter blue, and I hit the corners of the screen with the lightest blue. I also used the lightest blue to make some lines on the screen. I didn't like the black panel, so I painted it green instead. Next up, we'll make some air ducts. I cut out a length of XPS and then I cut off 2 smaller pieces so I could make the air duct bend, and I glued them on opposing sides of the main piece. I cut some strips of cardboard about 2 mm wide to resemble the joints between the different sections of the air ducts. Before gluing them in place, I bent them around the air duct so I could get a sense of how many I wanted and where I wanted to place them. Once that was done, I simply glued them in place using PVA glue. I painted the whole thing in metallic, and to make it look dirty and weathered, I gave it a wash of black, browns and green. Before we move on to the second half, let's just take a moment to thank my friendly patrons who help to make these videos happen. If you want to see your name here, get behind the scenes insights, and help support the channel, head on over to Patreon after this video. Right, we still have a lot to do, so let's get back to work. Next up, we're gonna make a small electrical box. I start with a small piece of scrap foam and I cut it down to a size that looks appropriate. Then I take some floral wire and cut 2 short pieces. I then take a paintbrush and bend the wires around it to get a nice curve. The second one I bend around a thinner part of the brush to make a narrower curve. Then I push them into the bottom of the foam with a slight overlap so they look like wires hanging from the box. Pull them out again, add a couple of dots of glue and push them back into place. Then I give it a quick paint job in much the same way as I did with the previous box. Pipes are a nice and easy way of adding detail to any building, so I'll make some out of paper straws. The straw has a seam spiraling around it, so I'll wrap it in painter's tape to hide the seam. This is a trick I picked up from Eric's hobby workshop. Be sure to check out his channel. The tape isn't wide enough to cover the straw entirely, but the gap will face the wall, so it doesn't matter. Of course, if you're using plastic straws, you don't have to do this. I proceed to cut the straw into 3 5cm segments. Then I give them a coat of PVA glue just to make sure the tape won't peel off later on. I've cut 2 small pieces of XPS foam to place at the ends of the pipes to create the illusion that they actually go somewhere. I've primed them black, but they feel a little bit boring, so let's make them more interesting by making them leak some toxic sludge. I use a small knife to cut a hole in one of the pipes, trying to pry out the sides so it'll look like it's burst from internal pressure. Hot glue is perfect to make this kind of sludge because it holds its shape. I fill up the hole in the pipe halfway and then I carefully drag the glue downwards, trying to make it look nice and gloopy. Then I give the top and bottom some texture using tinfoil. For the toxic sludge, I painted on a layer of green, and while it was still wet, I blended a bit of yellow into the green paint. The end pieces I simply gave a dark wash. I followed the same procedure as I showed earlier to paint the pipes. Let's make a round ventilation shaft. For this one we'll need a large bottle cap and a piece of mesh. I had this wire mesh lying around, but you can use granny grating, mosquito nets or whatever you have to hand. Or even strips of cardboard like I used with the air duct to make slats across the vent. I ran a bead of glue around the bottle cap and pressed the mesh into it. After it had dried, I trimmed away the excess net with my clippers. It looked a little rough, so I decided to make some trim for the vent to hide the edge. I used my compass to draw a couple of circles and then I cut out the shape with my knife, very slowly. And then I glued it in place and let it dry again. I painted it brown and stippled it with a couple of brown colors and a metallic to make it look nice and rusted. Now it's a simple matter of gluing them onto your buildings. I'll save mine for a future project, so be sure you're subscribed to see that in some distant future. Thanks for watching.